Okay. It's a pleasure to welcome Rabbi Jonathan Ziring, who, of course, I know from his days in Toronto, where he served as the Sgan Rosh Kollel or Rosh Beit Midrash of the Yeshiva University's Zichron Dov Beit Midrash here in Toronto. He currently, as for a number of years since he had already made Aliyah, he is the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Migdal HaTorah in Modi'in, has studied in Yeshivat Har Etzion for many years, and has just published a book recently, Torah in a Connected World on Social Media, which is what he'll be talking about a little bit, the miracle of Hanukkah. I don't know what ChatGPT has to say about Hanukkah, and a fine, a really very young, outstanding Talmid Chacham with many accomplishments. And it's a pleasure to welcome Rabbi Ziering to end what's been, I think, a wonderful day of learning what else to do on December the 25th, an Erev Hanukkah, and this, of course, already the first night of Hanukkah in Israel. Okay, Rabbi, Vakasha.
That it is. It is already Hanukkah here. Thank you, Ray Kelman. Always a pleasure to be able to learn with Torah in Motion, to see familiar phrases from Toronto and from elsewhere. Um, so um, so as Ray Kelman mentioned, I recently published a book on halacha and its intersection with the communication technology and social media, and I have a perennial interest in examining how halacha intersects with new technologies, with technologies that are still in development, ones that are only theoretical, um, for the simple reason that if you look at Rabbi Soloveitchik has a fascinating piece where he writes that if he had the option of penning a 14th animamen, a 14th dogma of faith, he would have made it the belief that the Torah is relevant in every generation. And it doesn't matter what social changes happen, what technological changes happen. The Torah always has something to say. And to that end, I find it to be a deeply religious experience to think about new technologies and what we can learn about them, how we can shape them through the lens of Torah. Um, so what I entitled this year tonight is it enough for ChatGPT to know about the miracle of Hanukkah? Um, and I want to explain what my question is. So as some of you I'm sure are aware, since ChatGPT became public, right, people who were in tech already knew that very significant strides had been made in artificial intelligence and machine learning over the last years, over the last decades. But when ChatGPT, which is a particularly effective generative AI, when it became public, right, and people could go on and ask it questions, and within seconds it will spit out essays, it'll spit out songs, poems, whatever you ask it to do. Sometimes it'll do a good job, and sometimes it will hallucinate. Right, and sometimes you'll get a good answer. You'll ask it, tonight is the first night of Hanukkah. Can you please give me a summary of what brachot, what blessings I need to say? I assure you that ChatGPT will be able to very quickly write you an essay that will walk you through the process. Of course, if you ask it a question that's ridiculous, it will, with equal confidence, give you an answer. For those of you who are in Israel, it's already Hanukkah. For those of you who are not, it'll be Hanukkah soon. And I assume many of you, most of you, will, after you light the candles, will sing Maoz Tzur. But I remember, just for fun, I asked ChatGPT, why is there a custom to sing Maoz Tzur on Pesach, which there is not. But that didn't stop ChatGPT from writing a beautiful essay explaining the very old sources to the custom of singing Maoz Tzur on Pesach. So there is a danger with generative AI that it is just as good as creating wrong answers as it is correct answers. But it really raises a lot of questions, because as soon as ChatGPT came out, one of the things that we found in yeshiva was that we have a weekly Dvar Torah email that's sent out with a Dvar Torah from one of the teachers and a Dvar Torah from students. And students are often less than excited to write. and this is even more true when they're in high school or college where they're constantly writing essays. And there were some who tried to get away by basically going to ChatGPT and saying, write me a Dvar Torah on Parshat Miketz. And by drawing on on sources online, it could construct something, sometimes wrong, sometimes right, usually not novel, very sort of cookie cutter, but it can do it. And when my students have problems with translation, ChatGPT is excellent. It's really excellent with translation. You can put in a complicated text, and it will really do a good job. I've tried it with complicated halachic texts. I have a rabbi I know who studies a lot of Kabbalah, and he tried putting in some very, very complex Kabbalistic texts, and ChatGPT basically instantly produced a relatively accurate translation. So generative AI has really created a reality where, and this is not new, it's just exacerbated. But the necessity for people to know things has been diminished. Because right now, it used to be that, in the time of Chazal, in the time of the Mishnah, so the oral law was still oral. So you had to memorize it. So it was very necessary for you to know Torah, not just have studied, but to know Torah. Then we wrote down the oral law, and it became written as well. So it became less necessary, but still, not everyone had books. Maybe you had the basic text, but they were very expensive. So still, memory was important. And then the printing press made it that books were much cheaper, and you had many, many more texts being printed. And remembering Torah became less important. And then once you have the internet and you have things like the Bar Ilan Responsa Project, and Svaria and Al HaTorah and Hebrew books and Otzar Chachma, it became easier and easier to present yourself as if you know a tremendous amount of Torah without really knowing Torah. And now ChatGPT has made it that if you know what you're doing, you ask it the right questions, and you can produce at least a plausible Dvar Torah, a plausible mini essay, maybe even book, depending on which level of ChatGPT you have, if you pay for it, so then you can do more within seconds without really knowing things. And definitely memorization becomes less important because, as long as you know to ask, right? So it takes 10 seconds for you to ask a question of ChatGPT, and then you'll get a pre-made answer that it's decent. And, if you take the extra minute to look up its sources, or you ask it for its sources, so then great. But this creates a problem, okay? Because Hanukkah, and as we know, right, you can send out the sources, right? You come and you send out the sources.
I know my computer broke last night, and I'm
Okay.
using a board computer, so I'm sorry. I did not. When did you send it?
Okay, so no problem. I mean, I just
Okay,
the camera is better on my phone, but I can pull it up on I can open the Zoom on my computer also.
I apologize for
Um,
that, but
no, that's fine. I'll open it on my computer also. But it's easier for me to also on a camera to be able to not have it in the mini screen. But Hanukkah, right? There's one of the central ideas of Hanukkah is here. I'll join on my computer without. Okay. I just put a request so I can pull it up on my computer. Right, a central theme of Hanukkah is the idea of Pirsumei Nisa, right? That everything we do is about making sure that people know there was a miracle. We constantly reinforce this. We reinforce this with the lighting of the candles. We reinforce this in our tefillot. Here we go. Is that big enough now? People can see that?
Not bad, but it could probably be used a little bit bigger. But
Okay.
I think it's legible, but
Tell me when. Good?
yeah, it's fine, I think. Yeah.
Okay. I can make it bigger, whatever you want. Okay. Right. So, right, the notion that there was a miracle and publicizing the miracle is central to what we do on Hanukkah. Right. We have all these reminders, right? So you look at source one, this is just the passage in the Gemara, which describes what Hanukkah is, right? My Hanukkah, the Tanur Rabbanan, B'chav Hei B'Kislev, Yomei de Hanukkah, Tamnayinun, D'lo Mispid Bahon, D'lo Anot Bahon. What is Hanukkah? It's the 25th day of Kislev. It's 8 days. You can't eulogize. You can't fast. Why? Because because when the Greeks came in to the Beit HaMikdash, they made all the oils impure. And when the Chashmonaim came and they looked for oil, they only found one that was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. There was only enough oil for one day. And a miracle happened, and they lit it for 8 days. And right, this is the miracle that's the background to Hanukkah. But as the Gemara tells us, number two, that is why it's not just the historical background to Hanukkah, but it is the justification and the nature of the mitzvah we do on Hanukkah. Hence, the Gemara says, Amarava pshitali ner beito v'ner Chanukah ner beito adif. Mishum shlom beito. The Gemara says if you have a choice between a Shabbat lamp, right, Shabbat lights, Shabbat candles, or Hanukkah, so you go for Shabbat candles because that brings peace in the home, right? You're eating and you have light, and that takes priority. Ner beito v'kiddush hayom, if it's between Shabbos candles and kiddush, so ner beito adif. Mishum shlo beito. Again, the candles come first because of peace. By Rava, what about ner Hanukkah v'kiddush hayom mahu? What about Hanukkah and kiddush? So kiddush hayom adif. Dittadir odilma ner Hanukkah adif. Mishum pirsume nisa. Do you say kiddush has priority because it's more common, and things that are more common generally go first in halacha? Or do you say that the Hanukkah candles are first because they publicize the miracle? And Batar Debaya, as soon as he asked it, Hadar Pashta, he then resolved it. Ner Hanukkah Adif Mishum Pirsume Nisa. The candles of Hanukkah come first because they publicize the miracle. And this is the central goal of Hanukkah. And it's not just that, right? In our tefillot, I gave you in number 3, just the Al Hanisim, right? It's not just in the acts we do; it's in the prayers we say. We repeat the miracles. Haner halalu shanu madlikim Al Hanisim, Al Nifod, Al Tshuot, Al Melchamot, Shasita lavotenu bayamim haim bezman hazeh yedei kohanecha akdoshim b'chol shmonat yimei Chanukah ner halalu kodesh haim. Ve'ein lanu reshut lishtamesh bahem el l'rotam bilvad kidei lahodot la'alel shimcha gadol nisecha la'nevlotecha la'yeshuatecha. These candles that we light, it's for the miracles and the wonders and the deliverances that you did for our ancestors through the Kohanim, through the priests. And for these 8 days, the candles are holy. And then I didn't give you, but also in right Al Hanisim. Sorry, this is Haner Halalu. In Al Hanisim, we do it again, right? And we have an even more detailed thing where we talk about the whole story, right? Bimei Matityahu Kohen Gadol Chashmonai Vanav, right? We tell the story in detail in our tefillot. So the question I want to pose is very simple, which is, okay, in a world such as the one that Chazal occupied, where most things were still oral, memory was really important. But now, as I've mentioned, memory has become less and less important because it's so easy to pull up that information when necessary. So what value does remembering have? What value does study have? Does the accumulation of knowledge have? When knowledge is so cheap, it's so easily accessed, right? Is it important, or why is it important for us to continue studying and filling ourselves with knowledge when it's just so easy, right? And the way I posed it, right, was, isn't it enough for ChatGPT to know it, right? Meaning, what if my students, the same ones who didn't want to write their Dvar Torah, said, listen, stop telling me multiple times a day that there was a miracle on Hanukkah and giving me all the details and making me repeat it in the tefillot over and over again. I get it. If I need to know the story, right, I'll pull out my phone, I'll tell ChatGPT, I'll say, give me the summary of Hanukkah in 500 words or less, and I'll have it, right? It's easy. Why do you have to remind me every day, multiple times a day? And this is not just a question, obviously, about Hanukkah. This is a question about education in general, meaning, what is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of Talmud Torah in a world where knowledge is just so cheap? So what I want to do is share just a thesis about this, because like I said, I have this obsession with learning about new technologies. And one of the reasons is that I think it forces us to ask fundamental questions, right? When the nature of education has changed, we have to ask, well, we have to go back to first principles, and we have to say, why do we value education? Why do we value Talmud Torah? Why do we value learning things and remembering things? Why do we value reminding ourselves of things constantly, right? When that takes up a lot of, right? It's a lot of work, right? There's a lot of work. It's so much easier to just ask ChatGPT, right? To have it. And when I need the information, I'll get it. But why am I spending all the time learning and imbibing the information into my very being? Like, why would I do that? So the next 20 minutes or so, I want to examine that question, right? What is the Torah's theory of education in general, right? The value of Talmud Torah, right? And what does that tell us also about Persumei Nisa and Hanukkah? Okay, so I'm happy for some thoughts right now, right? What do you think, right? Does the value of learning, does the value of knowing things become less important now that information is just so easy to access? Okay, I see that Janine is raising her hand. Janine.
Just as in one example, every year we start reading the Torah all over again. It's in every single time that we read it, that we study it in a Shavruta, we are learning new things, we are examining new concepts, and we are enriching ourselves and using our quote-unquote God-given ability to learn, to understand, and to evolve over time. We don't want to become dependent on a machine that can break down at any moment.
Okay, so Janine, I think you actually said two things, right? Janine said, well, we learn the Torah every year because it enriches ourselves, right? It makes us better. We engage with what God gave us. And then at the end, you said something else, which was, and we don't want to be dependent on the machine because it might break down, right? So right, those are, I think, two different things, right? One of those is saying that, right, your second claim is, look, in theory, it's not such a bad thing to rely on machines, but machines aren't reliable, so we need to have it in our own minds. The more fundamental claim you seem to be making at the beginning, which was, but there's more to it than that, because it's not just about being able to access information. The process of learning it is enriching, right? Now that formulation is much stronger, right? That says there's something about Torah which is important intrinsically. Engaging in Torah is intrinsically important, right? Which I agree with. So, but why, right? Or, well, who else wants to weigh in, right? I agree with that. And that's part of what I want to give voice to and give and frame. Anyone else want to weigh in? You can either in the chat, though. Can I see the chat? Yeah. The chat, or just scream out. Okay, so let me give a version. Okay, so in 2003, Rabbi Lamb gave a drasha, which was published, or at least this is the published version, where he asked a related question. Right, at the time he was asked, they were talking about already then, and they've continued to talk about it, technology like Neuralink, where in theory one day they'll be able to put a chip in your mind, and you can upload information to your mind. Now, whether that'll be part of your mind or it'll essentially be that you'll have, a database that you can search in your head, which will just speed up the process, but it won't be integrated into your brain. There are different versions of what this technology might look like, if ever. Rabbi Lam asked, right, would that exempt us from Talmud Torah, right? If you could just upload all Torah knowledge into your mind, so would that exempt us from learning? So he writes, the question is, which is more important, Torah study or Torah knowledge? Clearly, Torah study is exceedingly important, and so is Torah knowledge. But is there more importance to learning as a process or to knowing as a passive achievement? If Torah knowledge is the totality and aim of Torah, then it might be possible sometimes in the future to fulfill one's obligation of Torah study by purchasing a microchip that contains all 400 books. That's what it was then. Now it's thousands, tens of thousands, I think, of responsa from the Bar-Ilan CD-ROM and implanting into one's brain. One would have Torah knowledge. What more could one need? There are other shortcuts that technology might invent, by which one could achieve a great deal of knowledge without.
Is it just me or is he frozen for everybody?
No, he's frozen.
He's frozen.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to check. Okay, let me.
Right, Kalman, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it was about 25 seconds. Yes. Yes, we can hear you now. But maybe you refroze.
It looks frozen again.
Yes, you want to enjoy the Toronto weather. I get it. Yeah, you miss it. Okay. He's good at technology, so I imagine he'll figure it out if, may take a minute or two, but he'll.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully you're fine.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back. Yes.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm not sure where you lost me, so I'll just repeat the main question as Ray Lamb had it. Ray Lamb said, right, for him, the question of whether there's a value to studying Torah when you could just achieve knowledge without the process forces you to ask, what is the value of Torah? Is it to learn it or is it to know it? And he notes that there are different sources that point in different directions. So, for example, if you look at the pasuk in number 5, it says, "V'shinantev levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha v'veitecha u'lechecha v'aderech v'shach b'chav kumecha." Right? You should learn the Torah and speak about it when you're walking and when you're sitting and all the time. Right? That focuses very much on process. Right? You should always be talking about Torah. Right? Similarly, right? Lo yamush sefer haTorah zeh mipicha v'gita bo yomam v'layla. Right? You should never let it leave your mouth. And you should think about it. You should meditate on it day and night. Liman tishmor lasot k'chol ha'katuv bo. So they'll be able to do everything. Now, again, at least the first half of that implies an importance in the process. Right? You are meditating on the Torah. The latter half says so that you can keep the Torah, but at least the idea of meditating on the Torah constantly implies that the process itself is important. Right, the Gemara in Menachot points in this direction as well. And I'll say this a little bit outside, right? But the Gemara there wants to figure out how much Torah do you have to learn to fulfill your obligation of Lo Yamush Torah Sefer Torah B'zeh Mipicha. What does it mean to learn it day and night? So to put it simply, the Gemara is grappling with the question of whether day and night is meant to imply constancy or consistency, right? Does it mean day and night, right? Leaning once in the day, once in the night, a certain amount during the day and a certain amount at night? Or is it all day and all night? Do I still have you? You frozen. Now you're frozen.
It's
It's
a
fine.
metaphor for every day of your entire life.
No, we hear you fine. You didn't freeze again.
Everything's fine.
Right, Calvin, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Have two screens on. I'm not sure which one you're using, but you did not
Yeah.
freeze again. You were fine.
It was fine. Okay, so you froze.
No, I mean, I hope not, but okay.
Yeah.
You were fine.
Okay.
Somebody needs to be muted.
Yeah, no, I know that. It's just I don't know which Jonathan Ziring is speaking and which is not. Okay. Can you speak? No, I muted you. Okay, I muted the wrong one.
Well, I was trying both to figure out what was frozen.
Right. So I think the other one is frozen. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to kick you out of this one. And so if there's a problem, you'll come back, but hopefully you'll be okay. But this way it'll solve the problem. No. Oh, hold on a second. But you can speak. You go ahead. Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna switch to my computer and see if that's better.
I'm going to kick you out of one and see if that's better. Hold on a second. Just don't report. Okay. Now, can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, fine. So,
Good.
well, I now don't have the sources, but we lost a little bit of time. So I'll say it a little bit more outside, and you can consult the sources. Okay. So the Gemara in Menachot asked the question of how much do you have to study Torah? And the Gemara has different positions. You have to learn one chapter in the day, one chapter a night, which very much implies that it's consistency, right? You have to learn every day and every night, not all the time, but every night. It's the process all the time. And the Gemara says maybe even just Shema. Then the Gemara brings a opposite approach, and it quotes the story of of a particularly confident person, Ben Dama, who asked his uncle, and he said, "Listen, I know all of the Torah, so can I just go and learn Greek wisdom?" And he says, "No, lo yamush Torah zemipicha. If you can find a time which is not day or which is not night, so then you cannot learn Torah." But whether you take the minimalist view or the maximalist view, that implies that the process itself of Torah is what's important, right? You have to learn every day, or you have to learn constantly. It doesn't matter if you know Torah. What you have to do is learn Torah. On the other hand, other sources imply that the value of Talmud Torah is knowing Torah. So, for example, the Gemara in Kiddushin, on the word vishinantem, says, what does it mean? That the Torah should be sharp in your mouth, such that if someone asks you Torah, you'll be able to tell them immediately. And from this, the Ran learns that there is a mitzvah to know Torah. And many authorities, starting with the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and many later ones as well. Reb Zevin has a piece like this. Reb Salanter has a piece like this. Argue that really there are two components to Torah. There's a value to studying Torah, and there's a value to knowing Torah. These are actually either two mitzvot, or at least two aspects of the mitzvah. Now, within the value of studying Torah, it's not just enough to study Torah. Rashi quotes the Sifra and says that when the pasuk says in Bechukotai telechu v'mitzvotai tishmoru v'asitem otam, that if you keep my statutes, so Rashi says, what does it mean to keep God's laws? It can't just be keeping mitzvot. We know that already. So the Sifra says, and Rashi quotes it, "Shetiyu amelim b'Torah," that you have to toil in Torah. So Rabbi Lam takes this and he says as follows: to the extent that Torah is just about knowing things, about the result, so maybe technology can shortcut that. But to the extent that the process itself is important, just the notion that you're learning Torah and that you're involved in Torah, that can't be replaced by technology. And therefore, he says that no matter how easy it gets to access information, even if we could upload it into our brains directly, nothing could ever replace the value of studying Torah. And Rabbi Lam thinks that this is actually central to the difference between Greek thought and Jewish thought, and Hanukkah in specific, right? He says that Plato, right, highlights that there's a difference between being and becoming. Becoming means development, constant growth, and progress. Being means the aim, the end result. Greek thought, starting with Plato, said that being trumps becoming. Being is the ideal, and becoming is just a means towards achieving that ideal. The end is the more important. The word end in English, like the word tachlit in Hebrew, has two meanings. It means the final item or part, and also means the purpose, as in means and ends. Since the purpose is greater than what leads to it, being takes precedence over becoming. Accordingly, the Greeks believe that knowledge is the ultimate goal because it is the state of being. On the other hand, he notes that in Chazal, they emphasize struggle, right? And he quotes, for example, the Kotzker Rebbe, that the Gemara says that if someone tells you, Yogati velo matzati, that I tried hard and I didn't reach my goal, don't believe him. And the Kotzker Rebbe said, why? Because trying, the process is the goal itself. And therefore, Rabbi Lam says, Greek thought valued the result to knowing things, but Judaism values the process. There's a mitzvah in the process. There's a mitzvah to struggle, and therefore nothing can ever replace that. And he points to a story. Don't ask me to explain it, but certain Kabbalists, like Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch, claimed to have a chavruta with angels. And apparently the Vilna Gaon claims that angels used to come to him and ask him, would you please learn with us? Right? We would like to teach you Torah. And the Vilna Gaon rejected them. Right? He rejected them because he only wanted Torah, that he struggled for himself. And again, from this, Rabbi Lam concludes that no matter how much technology can shortcut the information, because Torah values the process, the learning, easily being able to know Torah is just not enough. That's Rabbi Lam's conclusion. But I think Rabbi Lam is right, but I don't think it's enough. Right? I don't think it's enough. And this is the main point I want to make in the next 5 minutes that we have. If you look at ancient writers didn't just emphasize the importance of study. They emphasized the importance of memory, right? of remembering things. Joshua Faur, who is famous both for creating Sfaria, but before that for becoming the 2006 U.S. memory champion, wrote a book about his experience of preparing for that called Moonwalking with Einstein. There he writes the following: the sheer volume of anecdotes about extraordinary memories in the classical world is itself telling. Seneca the Elder could repeat 2,000 names in the order they'd been given to him. St. Augustine tells of a friend, Simplicius, who could recite Virgil by heart backward. That he could recite it forward seems to have been unremarkable. A strong memory was seen as the greatest virtue, since it represented the internalization of a universe of external knowledge. Progressive education reform has accomplished many things. It has made school a lot more pleasant and a lot more interesting. But it's also brought with it costs for us as individuals and as citizens. Memory is how we transmit virtues and values and partake of a shared culture. Of course, the goal of education is not merely to cram a bunch of facts into students' heads. It's to lead them to understand those facts. Nobody would agree more than Raymond Matthews. I want thinkers, not just people who can repeat what I tell them, he says. But even if facts don't by themselves lead to understanding, you can't have understanding without facts. And crucially, the more you know, the easier it is to know more. Memory is like a spider web that catches new information. The more it catches, the bigger it grows. And the bigger it grows, the more it catches. And if you look at Socrates in Phaedrus, he writes this as well, right? That he didn't like writing, right? He didn't like writing because he says, your invention will enable them to hear many things without being properly taught. They will imagine that they have come to know much, while for the most part, they will know nothing. Right? He didn't even like writing, right? Because it allowed people to outsource information. The Ritva, by the way, writes that this is why the oral Torah can't be written, because it allows people to de-skill, right? And it allows them to not care about transmitting the Torah carefully. And when I was reading this, it struck me as follows, right? I think that for most of us, we could forgive somebody who relied on ChatGPT to translate a very, very complicated text, who Googled things, very, very minuscule details in a halachic question that comes up once every few years. But I think we would all look at someone as a failure of the Jewish educational system if they needed to look it up and say, what happened on Hanukkah? Or what is the 25th of Kislev? And even though that student can take 10 seconds and can, as soon as he looks it up, he can tell you, oh, Hanukkah is on the 25th day of Kislev, and this is what happened, and this was the miracle. The fact that it's not part of him, we would see as a lack. And I think the reason is because, as the ancient writers recognized, it's not just what Rabbi Lamb said, that one value to education is the struggle itself. And the second is achieving knowledge. There's a third part, and that is that by memorizing things, by making them part of us, it provides us with a lot. It helps us form our identity, right? Our identity as Jews is partially based on the fact that we know basic things, right? That we know what Pesach is, we know what Hanukkah is, right? If we had to look those up every time someone said, oh, Pesach is coming up, and you said, wait, what is that? I forgot what that is, right? You'd be missing part of your identity, right? Basic knowledge is part of who you are. It's also part of what makes us part of a community, right? The fact that if I go anywhere in the world and talk to a Jew, right, they will probably know what Hanukkah is, right? We can talk about the story. We can talk about what does it mean to you. Means that, right, it allows us to create a communal identity. It also is part of our experience, right? When we think about the miracles, when we sit at the Seder and tell the story, and we relive that experience, it changes who we are as people. It's not just intellectual, it's emotional, it's experiential. And the more that we de-skill, and the more that we rely on technology to not make us know Torah, to not push us to really understand it so that it becomes part of us, we may be able to access the information, but we lose the ability for the Torah and its ideals and all of its narratives and all of its laws and all of its values to shape who we are as people, to help us become part of a community, to experience God through the mechanism of Torah. And the fact that I think most people, when you ask them, would you think that somebody who could easily find out what all the holidays are within 5 seconds is missing something if he doesn't know it, him or her, they don't know it, it's not part of them, I think most people would agree yes. What that highlights is that a third goal of Talmud Torah is forming ourselves as people and as a community and experiencing things and not just being able to access them. And I think that's true of Talmud Torah in general, but in the last 30 seconds, and yes, someone said that's why memory, teaching, and parenthood are so central to Judaism. That's definitely right. We teach our kids, and we build a world around them so that this is part of who they are. And because of that, right, once you recognize that there's more to education about being able to get more facts, but you realize that by making those facts a part of you, you actually change. Right? Then you realize why, instead of telling people every time you want to think about Hanukkah, go look it up in a book or Google it or ask ChatGPT. Instead, what we do is for 8 days, we in every prayer that we say, and every time we eat food and we say the bracha afterwards, and every time we light the candles, we light candles which physically remind us of the miracle, and then we say a paragraph which articulates the miracle. We double down and triple down and quadruple down on it. The reason is because Pirsumei Nisa isn't just telling people that a miracle happened. It's inviting people to reflect on that and to make that reality of God's miracle and God's kindness not just something we know, something that we can access, but something that comes to the front of our mind, that shapes the way we walk through Hanukkah, that changes who we are over these 8 days, and that we carry with us for the rest of the year. And I think that, the more technologies come out that make it easier for us to be lazy, as it were, and, not make sure that we really understand things and know things, but to outsource that, the more we forget that learning Torah isn't just about learning, isn't just about knowing, it's about changing who we are, becoming people for whom the values of Torah are part of their identity, both personally and communally. And I think that's what we learned from Pirsumei Nisa, is that, if it was just about getting information, say it once on Hanukkah, that would be it. But it's not. It's about driving that information in so that the facts and the stories and the values change us as people and as individuals and as a nation. And no technology, I think, will ever be able to change that. So with that, for me, it's already Hanukkah. For you, it'll be Hanukkah in a few hours. I hope you take the opportunity when you see the menorah and you say Al Anisim and you say and you sing Ma'oz Tzur, and all those reminders we have, that you allow those not to just be pieces of information, but to remember that we're shaping our identity around that religious reality, because that's the one thing that no technology will ever be able to do for us, right? We're responsible for what facts and values and stories we allow to shape the people that we become. So with that, Chanukah Sameach.
Thank you. Okay, Chanukah Sameach. Okay, any questions, comments quickly? There's no next speaker until tomorrow, so but
yes, but I just want to say one thing. I heard I'll say who it is. I heard Neil Ferguson speaking a couple of days ago, and he taught at Harvard and a lot of other places, and he said the really bad thing about teaching in university these days is even in the good university, the students come in as high school students and they've never read a full book before. And so it's not just a Jewish thing, although it is a Jewish thing, it's a human problem too.
Right. So I definitely agree with that, right? This isn't a uniquely Jewish problem. What's unique is simply how much emphasis we continue to put in Judaism on the study of Torah. And therefore it's not a uniquely Jewish problem, but Judaism definitely has a unique perspective because this is so much who we are as people of the book, very, very much. There's a reason we're like that. It's because education and the constant commitment to education is definitional to Judaism in a unique way. But I agree with you that in principle, this isn't unique to us, but still, as Jews, we need to think about phenomena that are true for everyone and how they are reflected through, our unique tradition as well.
Okay. I think it's been a long day. It's 9:15 in Israel. We'll let you take care of the kiddies in Efrat. Okay. Enjoy. Have a Chanukah Sameach. Be well. And
Hanukkah Sameach.
Thank you,
thank
Rabbi.
everybody for
Thank
coming
you.
all day. Our next year is tomorrow night. Tonight, Rabbi Helfgott Shir is not having, he's in Israel, and Shuli Mishkin is not teaching tomorrow. She'll be teaching next week. But tomorrow night, Ruth Shane, who I think I know she was here most of the day. I know she's still here. We'll be giving our Parsha Shir tomorrow night, and I'll be giving my regular Shir on the Siddur on Friday morning. And next week, we'll have our regular classes, and look forward to learning with you. We'll post our sort of winter schedule for 2025. That's around the corner in the next few days. And I want to wish everybody Chanukah Sameach. Thank you, and everybody be well and enjoy. Have a nice Sufganiya now after learning. Okay, ciao, ciao. Laila Tov, Erev Tov. Good morning if you're still in California and wherever else you might be. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Chanukah
Chag
Sameach. Sameach.
Thank you for the excellent programs and speakers.
Thank you for coming. Okay.
Thank you for another enjoyable learning day.
Yes.
Great
Okay.
day.
Thank you very
Great
much.
day.
Thank you. Okay, listen, we need Christmas more often. Okay, what can I say? Hanukkah more often. All right, it's
They
good.
shouldn't fall together. That's just
Everything got together. We have Baruch Hashem. We have many opportunities for learning. We'll try to put some of these together. But thank you again. Okay.